I don't know if you remember this, but almost a year ago, I called you or I emailed you and said, hey, man, do you have time to talk? And you said, yeah. And it was like, actually, I know when it was. It was right after Christmas. It was like the day after Christmas.
Mm.
Yeah, it was the 26th of December. And I said, I want to talk with you about mindfulness meditation. And you said, great. And we hopped on a call. Do you remember this discussion?
Yeah, I think I remember the one you're referencing.
So I had had a very profound experience. And prior to that, I had been somewhat familiar, I think would be the most generous way of saying it, but somewhat familiar with meditation, primarily focusing on concentration-based meditations, like mantra-based practice. But I'd just come back from basically a rehab facility where you were sort of out in the middle of nowhere. You had no electronics. You weren't even allowed to have books or anything like that. And you were really sort of stripped down into, I guess, what could only be viewed as sort of your most fundamental basic elements of self. And I had an epiphany about 10 days into that, which was, I realized at the time what must be the first moment in my life that I was present. And it's weird to be almost 45 at the time and to think, wow, here I am, 10 days of having every stimulus removed from my life, plus going through this very rigorous sort of therapeutic stuff. And I remember exactly where I was sitting. I was sitting in the common room of this place at the edge of a couch. And in a moment, the only thing that mattered was exactly what I was perceiving around me. So the light coming in through the window and the way in which it made the room sort of light up, the faint scent of, something that was being cooked in the kitchen, a few, yards away or whatever. And I don't know why, I just felt like, wow, this is the first time I actually really think I'm not thinking about something that has happened or worrying about something that is going to happen. And the other thing that was odd that entire time I was there was they allowed us to exercise, which was a big deal. I was really pleased that I was still permitted to exercise, but you couldn't have music. You didn't have a phone or anything. So it was also the first time in my life I exercised only being able to listen to the sound of my breath.
Yeah.
So every morning I would run in the woods and you just heard the sound of the wind blowing by you and you heard your breath. And when I was, doing push-ups or whatever, it was the same sort of thing. And of course, I'd already read so much of your work. But the reason I wanted to speak with you that day is I wanted to understand, hey, am I getting a glimpse of what one might get if they meditate, if they move to a mindfulness-based practice? And what you said was, well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is I've got this app that's going to be coming out soon, and it's going to help you with this. The bad news is it's only in beta yet, but you can start right away. There's only, I think at the time there were maybe a dozen meditations.
Yeah, and the very bad news is going to take years for me to produce this thing because I'm completely incompetent.
No, but come on, the thing actually is out now, right?
Yeah,
and
it's finally
I know
out.
it was a little longer than you wanted, but
yeah.
And I very quickly put as many of my patients who were interested on the beta version. You guys were so gracious and let all of my folks on this thing. And in many ways, I view that as one of the most important transitions of my life. I think of, life as a handful of direction changes that, some of them that you look back at the past and say, wow, that was sort of a meaningful insight that came to me. So you've talked about this idea of noticing what is arising versus not noticing at all.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, well, so I guess I should define mindfulness, which is really the target state that one is trying to cultivate in at least this, probably what's the most popular type of meditation now. I mean, there are different, as you alluded to, there are different types. There are two basic types of meditation where the distinction is between being lost in thought and being clearly aware of whatever the object of meditation is. So that's true for all types of meditation. Thought really is the obstacle one is overcoming when one is learning to meditate, because our default mode is to just be lost in thought. We're telling ourselves a story all day long, and we're not aware of it. So once one begins to meditate, one is trying to pay attention to something, and this is where the two different types diverge.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Finally, I take conflicts of interest very seriously. For all of my disclosures and the companies I invest in or advise, please visit peterattiamd.com/about, where I keep an up-to-date and active list of such companies.